And we're live? We're live? We're live. Hell yeah, we are live. Cool. Welcome to the Server Smash Bros qualifying round for the Kangaroo Fight Club Randomizer event. So today we'll have Dylan Blay going up against Mark in five random surprise topics. So both debaters want to introduce yourself, plug your channels.
Yeah, I'll go for sure. So I'm Mark. I do a lot of philosophy videos on my channel. The channel is Dissatisfied Philosophy. It's kind of my main focus, specifically philosophy with like psychoanalysis and stuff like that. If you're interested in any of that stuff, you should check it out. It's pretty cool. You'll learn a lot.
Dylan?
Yo, it's Dylan G in the plaza. All right. I have a YouTube channel. I never upload, and I wish I did more. I got a haircut today, and I'm not sure if I'm rocking with it or not. But go subscribe, Dylan Blay.
Sounds good. All right. So if I'm not mistaken, it's 5 10-minute topics. Yeah, it's 5 10-minute topics. So I'll get the timer out for that too. Um, the first topic is, or let me actually get the timer first. All right, here we go. 10-minute timer. Perfect. The first topic is that Dylan, you're going to be defending the idea that Angles is a fictional character that Mark's made up. So let's go.
Okay. All right. So we see the rich storied tradition of Marxism and wonder often to ourselves, who is Engels? Where does Engels fit into the picture? Is he a real guy even? I don't know. Now, the first thing I would like to outline is that Auntie Düring, bro wrote so little, and this is why I think personally he was Marx's alter ego, that they had to take a section of Auntie Düring and make it into another book called Socialism, Scientific, and Utopian. Just a segment of that book. Like, clearly Marx didn't have enough time to write on behalf of his alter ego, Engels, and that's why they had to reproduce his material that already existed under other titles in order to make it seem like this Fred Engels, where I've been hearing so much about, is a real guy. Furthermore, in all depictions of Fred Engels, I'm curious. I'm curious to know whether anyone else sees resounding similarities to one Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, with the vibrancy of his beard and gray hairs. It could just be me, but the burden of proof has not been met that Engels, Frederick Engels, was a real person. Thank you. I cede my time.
Yeah, so basically what I want to focus on is the idea that Marx could somehow supplement his life that he was living. It's very known that Marx was poor. He was poor most of his life. Now, Friedrich Engels was not poor. Friedrich Engels was Marx's sugar daddy, and so you have to have Friedrich Engels to understand the story of how Marx was able to supplement his life, right? Because Marx was not able to. He was a poor journalist. He was a failed journalist largely at first, and he had to have this sugar daddy, being Friedrich Engels, to supplement his life. Now, on the Santa Claus claim, I'm not going to deny that there is some voluptuousness in the beard, but I do think that because Santa Claus lives at the North Pole, and Friedrich Engels lives in Germany along with Marx, it's a very, very tricky commute from the North Pole to Germany, right? Now, we're speaking of a time before planes existed, unless you want to assert that planes did exist during this time, which would be a whole other argument you can make as well. But planes didn't exist during this time. By ship, it would probably take, considering ships were pretty, that they weren't running on motors yet, right? We're speaking of the 1860s and stuff. The ship would probably take about a good 6 months probably to get to the North Pole from Germany. And that's a very long time for somehow this continuous supply of money to come through. Further, how are we going to speak about this alter ego that Marx had if they had different ideas? Marx and Engels disagreed commonly. Even after Marx died, Engels disagreed with some of the conclusions that he wrote in Capital, and so Engels wrote like little footnotes. So somehow Marx is dead, but his alter ego continues to live, even though we know where Marx was buried. I just don't think you have a good argument for this case.
So, unfortunately, what my opponent failed to recognize is that when referring to one St. Nicholas, he forgot the most obvious form of transportation that St. Nick would fly around in, which is to say, the sleigh. Another thing is how did Marx live vicariously with his publishings? Well, according to recent discoveries from academics all over the world, it is believed that the reason there was such a profound hatred of Ferdinand Lassalle is because Marx and him secretly had a gay extramarital affair, and Marx spoke out against his impulses frequently, sort of akin to Milo Yiannopoulos, let's say. Hated the homosexuality thing, but he simply could not resist. And Lassalle kept tempting him with. Obviously, I mean, he was a very prominent political leader in Germany, and he was a jurist as well, making those big baller dollars. So it would not be outrageous to say that Karl Marx was in fact published discreetly by Ferdinand Lassalle using St. Nicholas's resources under the pseudonym Friedrich Engels.
Okay. I mean, I see what you mean about the sleigh. I'm not going to disagree that Santa has a sleigh and he gets around the world, but I feel like that we would have some sort of documentation because only on Christmas he seems to do this. There's no other time in any part of history where we've considered that Santa is actually going around the world, which is not on Christmas. It's always on Christmas Eve. This is known. This has been going on for 4,000 years, right? Now, the question about this whole is LaSalle really Marx's secret gay lover? I'm not going to really comment on that. I don't know if that is true. We do know that Marx and LaSalle did have sex multiple times in Marx's carriage. It's very well known. We found the semen results and then the semen specimen, stuff like that, left on the carriage. Very well known. Many academics have talked about this. But what we do not know is whether or not this alter ego of sorts was created to try and distract people from this such gay relationship. And I don't think there's enough evidence to say so. I think that rather that Engels was jealous of Marx. Engels was like, oh no, I'm your sugar daddy. I want to be your daddy. Fuck the sugar. I just want to be the daddy. And so I think that because of this, there was an issue and there was a continuous conflict between both Engels, Marx, and LaSalle because of this need for Engels to be the daddy of Marx.
So it was a very well-known fact. I've sourced this very, I've done extensive research on this, and it is true that Ferdinand Lassalle had DID. So all I'm saying is, as Marx's gay secret lover, it could in fact be possible that he had told people his name was Fred Engels, and when they would describe him, to uncover these alleged photographs, he in fact did say, and this is recorded throughout history, describing himself with a voluptuous, thick, bushy beard in order to win favor among anyone who had potential relations with Marx, seeing as that was a traditional cornerstone of masculinity, the voluptuous beard, especially in Marxist circles. You can see it on Kotsky, you can see it on this alleged Fred Engels, who of course is LaSalle, as I've duly pointed out, Marx himself. I think it would not go without, it is very probable that Engels is one of LaSalle, Marx's gay lover, one of his dissociative personalities. And that is how Engels came into creation. Another one of these, which is very prominent in political circles these days, is of course the egoist Max Stirner, whose ego is actually one of many egos inside of Ferdinand Lassalle's head, as I've pointed out, and I've demonstrated clearly throughout this argument. And I think it goes without saying that with the unprecedented amount of evidence, connections, and parallels I have made, Ferdinand Lassalle, Marx's gay lover with many dissociative personalities, including a Santa Claus-esque figure with a popularly voluptuous beard in Marxist circles, as well as Max Stirner, who also does not exist, has been supplying Marx with the means necessary as a German jurist with the financial resources to publish secondary works under the name Fred Engels in honor of his gay lover's dissociative personality.
Yeah, so I think you made a rejoinder to your own argument within your argument, meaning that you basically gave me an argument that I'm going to use because you already said it. Basically, you said that, oh yeah, this beard is very, very popular for people around Marx's circle. So you're saying that because Santa Claus and Engels had the same beard, that somehow we cannot say that Engels actually existed. This would be more of an argument for why he existed, because so many men had this beard. It isn't like this crazy hairstyle or get up that they had, and they were the only two people. If Engels was wearing a red coat all the time and had a sleigh, then I'd be like, all right, you have an argument here. But you don't have an argument here. Now, further, I do agree that Max Stirner did not exist, but that is because Max Stirner is actually Engels. You were halfway there. You got it right that Max Stirner does not exist, but you failed to recognize that Max Stirner is actually Engels. There are many, many occasions with Marx speaking to Engels, and Engels returns the letter and the reply saying, from Max. Now, we've seen this because he scratched it out, and he's used whiteout and stuff like that, or what was available to him at the time of whiteout, paint basically. But you fail to recognize that this is because Max Stirner does not exist, but Engels still exists, because he is Max Stirner.
So curious that you point out the red cape, but I would like to point you to the most popular color used throughout communist movements in history. Could this perhaps be a coincidence? I think not. It is very clear that Santa Claus, Ferdinand Lassalle were in cahoots when the creation of both Max Stirner and Friedrich Engels came into existence. And this is further demonstrated by all of these analogous things I have pointed out, or not analogous, sorry, related things that I pointed out.
That's
Pardon?
time. It's time for that subject. All right. Mark, you will now be defending that Destiny and, what's his full name? Sorry. Joseph Broz Tito are the same person, right?
Am I good?
Go.
Okay. Yeah, so it's very, very obvious how Destiny and Tito are the same person. Number one, they both have not particularly American heritage. Now, Tito grew up in Europe, Destiny in Latin America, but we all know about the Nazi move from Germany after 1945 to Latin America. This is because parts of Destiny's family traveled from Germany down to Latin America, and that's where Destiny in Cuba lived, right? We know this stuff. Now, further, we also know that Destiny is not a communist. You know who's also not a communist? Tito. Tito was a market socialist, and Destiny in the past has given some sort of leeway to market socialism. He said, okay, co-ops can be good, we should maybe try them out in capitalism. But perhaps when Destiny realized after the fall of Yugoslavia, I think that he became more capitalist. Now, we know that from 2017 onwards, Destiny started to move right-wing. I have the proposition that he began moving right-wing after the fall of Yugoslavia. He was originally still a market socialist, you know, the whole Yugoslavian market socialist system, but he began to move right-wing after that. And this is the Destiny we have today, the neoliberal, the denigrated Destiny.
So to counter that, I would first like to point out the fact that Josip Broz Tito actually never spent any time in Germany. I would not be surprised if the Noslib Destiny, of course, had in the 1940s. That would not come as a shock to me. However, Josip Broz Tito, the furthest he escaped from the southern Balkan states was actually his time imprisoned by the Russian Empire during World War I. So I have no reason to believe that during the unfortunate Nas Destiny invasion of Yugoslavia, which this is my counter argument, I believe Destiny is actually Otto Skorzeny. So I believe that Destiny is somehow very closely intertwined, or is himself Otto Skorzeny. Now, I think there's obviously the evidence that my opponent pointed out, but just like in our last conversation here for the previous 10 minutes, I think he's a little off the mark, unfortunately. But his head is in the right space. Now, due to the fact that Josip Broz Tito is reported, other than during World War I, having never departed from Yugoslavia until the full Yugoslav government came into existence, where he was very clearly documented smoking in the White House and dancing with the Queen, very base, very, very Sigma grind set, if you will. He had spent a majority of his time in Yugoslavia with thousands, tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands of partisan soldiers. So I think my opponent has just mistaken the way that the march of history played out for Destiny and Otto scores Zestiny, if you will, and Mr. Josip Broz Tito. I understand how closely intertwined these two are, but they're opposition.
Yeah. So I understand what he's saying here. Otto Skorzeny definitely has some resemblances, I'd say, to Destiny. Now, not in looks, but in terms of where they are, their locations. I'm not going to deny that Destiny was probably at the fall of Berlin in 1945, probably with Hitler in his office. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to say that isn't true. What I am going to say is that Tito is actually there too. We know that there's been communications in the area of the USSR and the areas around it with Germany. There were spies and such like that. My proposition is that Tito was actually a spy for the Balkan countries, whatever you call them, during this time, because he was known to be friends with Destiny. Again, I'm not going to deny Destiny wasn't there. I'm not going to deny that there weren't friends. But to say that they're the same person is similar to your argument at the last one about how LaSalle and Engels are the same people. No. They certainly had some characteristics, but again, I think my opponent is just a little bit wrong, right? And I see where he's going with this. It totally makes sense. How Skorzeny was in the White House. Destiny's been in the White House before with Donald Trump, his favorite leader. But I fail to see how there is a clear connection between these two.
Now, unfortunately, Otto Skorzeny never spent time at the White House, which it might have been a blunder on my opponent's behalf, but I would just like to acknowledge it briefly. However, that being said, Mr. Josip Broz Tito, only time he spent was clearly documented in the Soviet Union as time spent imprisoned. Otto Skorzeny, however, he did spend time in Yugoslavia, and Destiny might have even spent time in Yugoslavia. There's no denying this fact. This is just objectively true. But to say that they were in cahoots is a bold logical leap on behalf of my opponent here, one which he has yet to substantiate, especially considering it was Mr. Josip Broz Tito who's clearly dodged the documented assassination attempts on him by Mr. Otto Skorzeny and Mr. Joseph Stalin, who, of course, in the Soviet Union was clearly not alleged with Tito based on the 22 assassination attempts. Furthermore, I would like to point out that Destiny did flee to Cuba. However, due to the non-aligned movement and basically the existence of, Soviet influence in Cuba, it is highly unlikely, dare I say impossible, that Josip Broz Tito would have had any strong relations to Cuba, which is where we all know Nas Destiny, Otto Skors Destiny, fled to after World War II.
Yeah, so it's pretty obvious where my opponent is again going wrong here. He is again citing Stalin as a source for this sort of assassination. I don't buy it personally. I think it's like the JFK one, right? There's some questions that are remaining. But what my opponent is failing to see is that while Tito was in the Soviet Union working for the government under Stalin, Stalin had to keep this quick little this conflict remaining. He had to keep this internal conflict because he realized that Tito was more powerful, similar to Trotsky. Basically, he recognized, Trotsky's going to actually take over, and I'm going to lose the general election. He had to rig it. And he had to create that internal conflict, right? Now, this is again very recognized that, yes, Destiny was in Germany in 1945. He probably was in Yugoslavia in 1945. I'm not going to deny this. What I am going to deny is that Skorzeny was also in Yugoslavia and in Germany when Destiny was there. It just doesn't seem plausible. Now, my opponent has again put this whole proposition that, Tito probably didn't even go to Germany. It's shaky. It's shaky ground for sure. We have documents which show Tito to specifically be talking to Hitler's wife in a romantic manner. Now, you can do what you want with these documents. Perhaps that they are not the most clear, but there is certainly a relation between the two. And to write him, he had to be in Germany during this time.
Well, I won't deny the promiscuity of one Eva Braun.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand the allure of Mr. One Josip Broz Tito as well. It is important to point out the flaw in the argument, though, that you cited 1945. However, it is clear that Yugoslav liberation and the formation of the Yugoslav government actually occurred in 1943, and that's where they commenced development of the democratic liberated Yugoslavian era of governance, which is the initial time after Nazi liberation, or if you will, Scorzestini liberation, seeing as he was the key focal driver point of, attacking Yugoslavia. However, I do not think that based on the writings and accounts of Mr. Josip Broz Tito that Otto Scorzestini was in cahoots with him, let alone is him. That burden of proof, unfortunately, has not been met.
Yeah. So your argument was that Scorzani is destiny. So I don't know how you're saying that there is no connection between the two. That was your argument, and I'm trying to figure out here how you somehow get from the Yugoslavian rebellion and creation of the state in 1943 to still not recognize that he was still with Hitler. This would make sense because countries that are new, they want to have ties with bigger countries. And so he looks around and goes, well, I'm very far from Britain. I'm quite far from America. Russia, we already are in this internal conflict. So who am I going to side with? Well, he thinks Hitler. So he goes to Hitler. This is why he's in the office. Now, I said that Destiny was also there. I'm not denying this. Destiny was probably, Nas Destiny, whatever you want to call him, was probably in the office at the same time. Did Tito escape the bunker? Yes, of course, he escaped the bunker. How? Well, pretty simple. He time traveled. It's pretty simple. Now, he time traveled from here to the 1970s, where there was much more talk about Yugoslavia and all the associations with Tito, because when he time traveled, just happened to match up with the period where there was terrible unemployment because they don't have a leader. If you don't have a leader, you're going to have bad unemployment. There is no demand. There is no stimulating demand. There is no stimulating employment through the government, right? So it makes sense how he time traveled back and all of a sudden, we hit unemployment. We don't have a leader. It just, all this lines up for me perfectly, and I'm just failing to see my opponent does not understand the argument that I'm making.
That's fine.
So
Thank you.
Oh.
All right. And we have the third topic. Are you ready for the next one?
Yes.
All right. Dylan, you will be defending JonTron is a net benefit to the world. And go.
Now, one of the greatest philosophers in history, and I'm sure you're well acquainted with this person's work, is the philosopher Getkel. Now, call it what you will, the moral philosophy I'll be advocating here is comedic utilitarianism. On average, JonTron produces net benefit through giggles, ha-has, and chuckles, comparably to his, what would you say, white nationalist rhetoric, or the way he engages with terms like, and he says racist things. That is quite humorous. In the purview of a white male such as myself, I get net chuckles and ha-has. Therefore, there is no logical conclusion to be made other than JonTron is a net benefit to society. If you would like to question comedic utilitarianism, well, I'm afraid you'd have to take that up with Getkel. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm well aware of Getkel, and I've read his work, and I understand comedic utilitarianism has a pretty big effect on the current utilitarian movement. What I have to say is that we're purely valuing the opinion of a white male. Now, who makes up the most people in this world? Chinese people. They're the most people. They're the most people. So why are we valuing the opinion of a white male when JonTron has made opinions in the past against Chinese people? This would increase suffering onto them, and as they are the majority in the world, we are trying to decrease suffering. And again, you, a white male in America, may find this funny, but there's white males in France, in Germany, in Spain, you can say, Italy, who don't speak English, so they don't even understand what he's saying. So we're speaking of purely American white males rather than valuing the entire world in this utility calculation, which I think is pretty clear is a little bit miscalculated.
Now, unfortunately, you have not met the burden of proof that other people exist. Other than the voices which I'm hearing frequently inside my own temple, in my kitchen. However, seeing as I can only logically deduce that the only person who isn't an NPC that can giggle, chuckle, and haha is myself, your argument fails to hit a substantial mark here. It doesn't, mark, if you will. So, seeing as premise one, I'm the only person that exists. Premise two, good is measured by giggles, chuckles, and ha-has. The conclusion itself has to be only way to calculate benefit is through my giggles, chuckles, and ha-has. Do you contest that argument in any capacity?
Quite easy. So I'm going to take issue with your proposition one. What I would say to that is that we know that other people exist because we have to have access to the sensory world, right? This is understood because when you posit an individual entity such as you posit in turn something to differentiate you. This is required. You cannot just have a single individual entity. This always requires something to differentiate it from. We could say this is like another person. Now, I will say that it is only possible that you and me are the only people that exist. Everything else is, and the voices in our head. However, your argument was that only you exist, but my point is that no, something else has to exist as well. You have this connection to the sensory world which cannot be forgotten. Now, proposition two, again, this falls from proposition one, so this would only follow if that last one was valid, which it isn't. So, but I'll entertain it here. Now, median utilitarianism. Does increasing laughing really decrease suffering? It's very common for people who are actually in suffering to laugh to try and hide this, right? This is an unconscious defense mechanism. Very, very common. So, for instance, there was a great example from Kant, where Kant there was a man being taken to the gallows, and what he said was, "Oh, today's a great day." And the joke is, well, he's creating this defense mechanism to try and hide himself from the reality of a situation. It's very obvious here what you're doing. You're valuing the defense mechanism, which is, again, just trying to hide from the situation at hand.
Now, seeing as this is a defense mechanism, curious how my opponent says this would be my choice of defense when I am clearly being under constant pressure and onslaught of the voices in my head, such as my opponent here. What Mark fails to realize is I am currently riding a city bus, and I am in the walls of said city bus. And everyone around me, they're a figment of my imagination, including the bus itself. So really, I have no idea where I am, no idea what I'm doing, and I am the only person that exists.
Yeah,
and I am chuckling and ha-haing the pain away.
Yeah.
But that is a good thing. That is a good thing. Because it is the only thing I can do to combat the voices in my head. Please help me, God. Someone send me an antipsychotic, please.
Yeah, so it's pretty obvious.
This is a plea for help. I'm not joking.
Sir. Again, the issue here is you do not address any of my propositions. I had two propositions. They're both logical. They're both sound, valid, all the above. I made two substantive rejoinders to your statements. You've addressed neither of them. Now, we can get on to why I think that more so your argument fails, because you might be in the city bus, but seemingly you're not. And so I trust my seemings rather than this just created statement that you make. Again, we should probably trust our seemings as if we have nothing else to judge them against. This is basic understanding of Michael Huemer's probabilistic reasons principle. Or the original one by Getkull, who you mentioned, because Getkull's late position, which you didn't mention, was the proposition's reasons principle. He originally had comedic utilitarianism, but he realized the failure of this and the flaws in it. So he moved towards proposition reason principle, where what seemingly exists is what we value to exist.
Unfortunately, you didn't address one of my fundamental claims that I may or may have not have said, but I refute your existence. You don't exist.
I've explained to you how that's impossible because an individual thing has to posit under the thing, right? Just taking A or I would always have to have something to differentiate it from just nothing, right? If you take one thing, there is no differentiation between that and nothing. So you're just saying that you don't even exist, which is an interesting or a skeptical argument you can make, but that would break your first proposition that you originally made.
Interesting. I concede the argument.
Understood.
Even if you are a voice in my head, you exist under my purview of observation, which is voice in my head.
So,
however, I can sense you.
Just this topic or the whole debate? This topic, yes?
Just this topic. All right,
then are we ready to move on to the next topic?
Sure.
Awesome.
Once the bus driver hands me my antipsychotics.
Well, again, you're seemingly not on a bus, so I can't really trust you, right?
This is going to be...
I can't trust me either.
This is going to be a wonderful topic for Mark to defend, since given the situation we're in. Mark, you are going to be defending the idea that schizophrenia is a preferable condition.
Okay, perfect. Yes, it's pretty basic. Schizophrenia is a dismissal of the given law, the given cultural norms. These cultural norms are capitalism. As everyone here is anti-capitalist, you are going to want to have the schizophrenic who disposes of cultural norms, who disposes of this need for commodity production, who understands that it is their own desire which creates production. It is not this flow of money, right? Now, you need this person because they're going to go, I don't care about your norms. I don't care about any of this. I'm doing my own thing. I'm taking a walk in the mountains. Do not make me sit in your therapist seat. You are like a priest or a therapist. You're saying, no, you must sit down in this seat and you must be cured. I'm saying, no, I'm free. I'm free and you're trying to oppress me. And again, you're like a priest. You're like a therapist. Neither of those people really exist. They're both skinwalkers, so.
Well, I won't deny my initial biases to the United Skinwalkers Alliance, or USA. I will say that schizophrenia is in fact not a preferable condition to have because it reinforces capitalist norms. These norms of competition for the voices in the head to compete with one another is absolutely ludicrous and reinforces capitalist stereotypes in the minds of the schizophrenic. It is easy to see here that my opponent has not clearly, fully analyzed the effects and ramifications of schizophrenia as it relates to capitalism.
Quite obvious, the issue here. You're taking a more internal approach. I'm taking an external approach. My issue is let's create anti-capitalism. The schizophrenic does this. The schizophrenic may have competition in his head, but competition seems to be natural. If we're put on a desert island, we're going to have to fight to survive. The schizophrenic is like on a desert island. The voices in their head are on a desert island, okay? They're fighting to survive. Now, this is very common. This is Nietzsche's like will to Mauer, whatever you want to call it. And the whole issue here is that the external effect of the schizophrenic is anti-capitalist. You, again, are a priest, you're a therapist. You're sitting the schizophrenic down and you're saying that, no, actually, you cannot resist capitalism. You must be capitalist. You must be a capitalist subject. And I am against that.
So externally, it is curious that the schizophrenic lives and participates in capitalist society. And they're constantly competing within their own head with the voices. I think it's absurd to posit that the schizophrenic does not reinforce capitalist ideals. They are not truly free. They have not freed themselves. The only way in which they have freed themselves is to go shit on a sidewalk and no one make a huge deal out of it. However, the competing voices in the head, the participation in capitalist society, and albeit the breaking of norms isn't really connected to capitalism. It obviously you can be a fascist and you can break norms. You can break the norms, albeit they might be hierarchical. Your state can break norms away from the capitalist hegemony.
Yeah, so by cultural norms, I mean more so things like the dichotomy of gender and the dichotomy of production versus like efficiency, right? This is needed for capitalism. And a person who's very ordered in their mindset, who has what J-Reg called a horizontally oriented, a vertically oriented mind, they view hierarchy and this need for dichotomies to always be there. The schizophrenic has a horizontally oriented mind, according to J-Reg. Now, J-Reg is a very well-respected scientist in the field. I am sure you will not deny this. I've read many of his papers, very well known. But the whole point here is that the schizophrenic goes beyond this vertical order, we need this dichotomy of gender, we need this dichotomy of the importance of efficiency and production. The schizophrenic goes, no, I'm just going to shit on the sidewalk. And that's freedom. You hate freedom, sir. Now, socialism is about freedom. It's been about freedom since the beginning with Karl Marx, all right? And you hate freedom. Even the Christian socialists were about freedom. St. Augustine, Mamas Maminus, all these people were very, very pro-freedom. And you, sir, are a capitalist because you want to repress and take away freedom.
Unfortunately, I failed to understand, due to what you said, how the schizophrenic does not hierarchically place the voices. If you would like to consult one of the leading academic sources on television, the Learning Channel, and their 10-year-old documentary on a schizophrenic 7-year-old child, this child actually expresses in which the hierarchies of the schizophrenic voices in her head have laid out and categorized themselves in her mind as a hierarchical structure. All I'm detecting is a lack of control, and not true freedom, as the hierarchies that promulgate with the extension of the market competition principles I've outlined earlier, thanks to the schizophrenic's voices in their head, still do not continue to promote these hierarchies and denounce freedom. It seems as though the subjugation of the schizophrenic by the voices in their head has actually led to the schizophrenic's oppression in society. And you could say, well, this is not external, but rather internal. If they cannot combat this internal contradiction, then how will they express the schizophrenic lifestyle, if you will, to society? How will they promote the schizophrenic lifestyle?
So again, I'm not going to rely on the words of a 7-year-old girl. I'd rather rely on the words of Judge Schraber, who was one of Freud's case studies, who was a schizophrenic. Now, Judge Schraber is a respected judge in his area, and so we should probably rely on someone who is an adult, And Judge Schraber's whole thing was like that he was God, but all other things were God too. So all things are God, which would be a reducement of hierarchy. There is no hierarchy if everything is God. Again, I'm not going to rely on a 7-year-old girl. I'd rather rely on, a respected judge in his area. Now, further, Judge Schraber is also a great example because Judge Schraber destroyed gender norms. He had this desire to be like a pregnant woman during sex. He wanted to imagine himself as a pregnant woman while he was having sex, okay? So again, this is the reduction of gender norms. You're an example of a 7-year-old girl. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I've heard things about the Learning Channel that they're funded by Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, but, maybe they're not. Again, those are capitalists, and you're using capitalist work. But back onto the topic at hand. There may be that competition in the head. Again, we're using Judge Schraber, again, over your case study. But even if there is that competition in the head, the importance of external schizophrenia needs to be understood. Because this external schizophrenia is what changes. You having this idea of communism in your head, just like an ANCAP who has ANCAPistan in their head, doesn't mean anything. We have to actualize this in the world, and that is only through creating schizophrenics.
See, my problem with your point here is that you reject outright my sources, but expect me to accept yours, when the Learning Channel has been one of history's best documenters of real-life phenomena. And, I mean, with the drawings they provide from the little girl, this is the closest thing we can get to an empirical recount of the little girl's experiences. They are detailed, artistic masterpieces in which outline the way the hierarchy of the schizophrenic voices form. And you choose to reject that? I simply can't fathom this.
Yeah, so Judge Schraber also drew pictures when he was in prison for being gay, because again, he rejected gender norms. Was this little girl gay, or was she straight? Do you know?
Well, as far as I'm aware, see this. No. See this. Unfortunately, this 7-year-old girl, as it stands, has currently existed in society as an asexual. So to reject the plight of the asexual 7-year-old girl is to fully outright reject minorities. And I dare say there are more asexuals than homosexuals. And would you like to further oppress an extremely marginalized group? I think not. You rejecting the Learning Channel is an absolute disgrace to the scientific method.
Again, I reject the Learning Channel because they're funded by Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, who are two capitalists. I can give you the information. It's from the Library of Congress and from jreg.com. I mean, these are very reputable sources. You can't deny these. Now, back to Judge Schraber. Judge Schraber drew these pictures when he was in prison, and he also recounted his entire story in his book. He published a book in 1903, which you can go find on Amazon right now, talking about his time and explaining exactly what he thought. And this is where he talked about how, we're all God, there is no hierarchy, which is communism. If we're all gods, that is communism. It is the negation, actually, because when you make everything a god, you negate the hierarchy that is required for God. Thus, you go beyond anything conceptualizing religion, as religion is another repressive force, because again, I called you a priest at the beginning, and you're continuing to demonstrate your priestness in this argumentation.
Well, I have provided a clear, more modern source than yours, one in which you denounce due to the fact that Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton support, yet the
JREG provided the information. Are you going to
JREG? Yeah, I would actually. I can pull up a link to one of my preferred research and study websites, LaRouche Pub. And I can, in fact, send you the words of Mr. Lyndon LaRouche himself that said, this 7-year-old girl on the Learning Channel is an asexual. And the Learning Channel is not funded by Joe Soros and Hillary, whatever you said her name was. I don't
Weird you
even remember.
mentioned. Kind of weird
Hillary
you
Duff.
mentioned George.
No, I
Yeah,
said
it's
Joe
kind of
Soros
weird.
and Hillary Duff.
Yeah, so Soros.
Those were the
Kinda
people
weird
you
how
provided, right?
That's time. All right, for the final topic, we'll be doing a coin toss. So we'll just go with Dylan, heads or tails.
Heads.
All right, I'll stream just so you know that I'm not cheating. Show screen. Google, flip a coin. Perfect.
I only trust this if it is backed by the Learning Channel, the channel for learning.
Yeah, and I already explained how we should probably rely on someone who actually wrote stuff down rather than talking to a person who just told them about it, right? The man, LaRouche, was not the person who actually was the schizophrenic. For my example, Judge Schraber was the schizophrenic who wrote his book down. Again, I can show you the book if you'd like to.
That topic is over. So you got heads. So Dylan, you get to choose. Do you want to take the affirmative or the negation on the Soviet Union never collapsed?
I will take the affirmative on this one.
Okay. Then you may begin.
Yeah.
So it's very clear that the Soviet Union has never collapsed nor dissolved. Officially, the Soviet Union's existence continued well beyond when Gorbachev lowered the flag in Moscow to Kazakhstan. Now, the Kazakh people and their leader Borat have not denounced the Soviet Union since Gorbachev have lowered the flag, and this leads me to believe that the Soviet Union still exists to this day. Thank you.
Yeah, so I recently listened to a phone call with Borat and Joe Biden. Basically, Borat was like, there's been these misconceptions that the Soviet Union still exists. We are here to say that we are not Soviets now. There is a small socialist sector in Syria, which we're all very familiar with as we all watch Foch. Foch loves this, and so we all watch Foch. We know about this, but Kazakhstan is not the socialist center. I will make the argument that Soviet Union has collapsed. Okay, cool. We've seen the flag lower. We've seen the Kool-Aid man enter. We've seen the Pizza Hut commercial with Gorbachev. But there's still that sector of Syria which is socialist. Now, I will say that the remaining Soviet officials moved here, and that's where they live now. They live underground. There is the above ground area of the commune, but then there is the underground, which is where the ex-Soviet officials moved to. So, again, that quote-unquote Soviet influence is still there, but it is only through the ex-Soviet officials of the country that collapsed.
So what my opponent fails to realize is the incredibly strong tie that Kazakhstan and Syria have. I believe it is not a coincidence that the leader of Syria currently, Borat al-Assad, is none other than President Borat of Kazakhstan. Due to the very similar naming conventions, the Afro-Asiatic male with the black hair and the removable mustache, as we've seen President Borat make many appearances without the mustache, these are not two different people. And despite what the Joe Soros, Hillary Duff media says, it is very clear that Syria under Borat al-Assad and Kazakhstan under President Borat are one and the same. They're tied, and they are continuing the Soviet tradition to this day.
Yeah, so my opponent has a miscalculation. President Borat and Borat Assad are two different people. But there is a question here, because President Borat, or Borat Assad, is not actually the president of Syria. The president of Syria is, as we all know, the Saudi Arabian prince. It's very well known that the Peninsula of Arabia expanded during many wars long ago, and there has been that understudy, the secret deep state, if you will, of the Saudi royal family in Syria. And I'm not going to deny that Bashar al-Assad is not in power in Syria. He certainly is. He is one of the legislators, but there's 500 legislators. So I don't know why we'd single out one single legislator and say that, oh, they somehow are the same people. Because, again, there is that little sector in Syria, that commune. But these are two different people. The Kazakhstan Borat versus the Borat Assad, which is, again, just one legislator with the leader of Syria being the Saudi royal family.
Now, I understand this, but you fail to acknowledge that the leading party in Syria right now is the Borathist Socialist Party. So unfortunately, my opponent has made another misconception. The ideology, the leader, and the leader of Kazakhstan, all in cahoots, are in fact one and the same, President Borat. And the reigning ideology is Boratism. Now, I mean, I can outline core tenets of this to you, but Boratism clearly and efficaciously continues Soviet traditions and trends, those of which left by Joseph Stalin, who is actually believed to be Borat's grandfather, whom he calls Bartok the rapist in the movies. These are one and the same person. So I fail to, I fail to find that my opponent meets the burden of proof, not to say that the Boratist party, Bartok the rapist Stalin, President Borat, and Borat al-Assad. And I mean, we've seen the existence of monarchies throughout history. No one will deny this. Syria, Kazakhstan, aka the Soviet Union, and the Boratist party are actually a monarchy since Bartok the Stalin rapist. This lineage has continued. And I mean, obviously, there has been a cabal of shadowy leaders such as Azamat Begatov, President Borat's cameraman, but they do not share the common Soviet ideology of Boratism.
Yeah. I mean, the whole issue here is that you're just neglecting the importance of the Gandhi variable. Gandhi moved from India to the Middle East to ensure this continuance of socialism. Gandhi was a socialist of sorts, but he wasn't a communist because, again, USSR is communist. It is a communist system. This is a socialist system that we're speaking of, the commune. Now, if you're getting your terms mixed up, that's okay. We can look up the terms using the very reliable tpusa.com. They're very unbiased. I use them personally for all of my questions about definitions. But the whole point here is that it is the Saudi royal family and the variable of Gandhi mixed in. And I'm not going to deny that Stalin is still living. He certainly is still living. He time traveled. The quote-unquote death of Stalin, because I've seen the movie. It's a fiction movie. The movie really is showing something which is kind of like Harry Potter. I kind of, when I think of it, I think of Harry Potter.
Yes, so, we do recall when he stole President Tito's time travel cigars. I'm well aware. I'm following.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I just want to make sure. But yeah, no, my whole point here is that I don't think that Borat the rapist being Stalin really means anything for your argument. I think these are kind of extra things thrown in to try and pad it. I think my argument is pretty secure, that it is the Saudi royal family controlling Syria, and it is Borat, who is the leader of Kazakhstan, but it is Borat Assad, who is just one of the 500 legislators in the Syrian legislature.
So, unfortunately, my opponent is using his Western chauvinism to conflate the struggles of Kazakhstan and Afghanistan, albeit Afghanistan, during the Brezhnev era, was under Soviet control. What he fails to realize is that this new synthesis of ideas that go all the way back to Bartok the rapist and have continued to evolve today in a dialectical relationship to form the ultimate Boratist party ideals are still continuing their rich tradition and have been passed on by Bartok the rapist grandfather to Azamat Begatov, shadowy cabal leader, cameraman for President Borat, to the current leader, President Borat al-Assad. I mean, there's no way my opponent could contradict this logic, and it's very coherent. The Soviet Union is a monarchy. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not going to disagree that, again, the Soviet Union was a monarchy. Stalin was a monarch. He loved kings. It's very well known. He wrote many books about how great kings were called. The first one was Kings I Love. The second one was Vladimir Lenin, Don't Kill Him. Many books like this were all about Stalin's love for kings. I'm not going to deny that the Soviet Union was not a monarchy. Now, what I will deny is that there's this shadowy cabal, but that shadowy cabal is run by Borat's cameraman. It is not. It is run by the Saudi royal family, as I've illustrated. Their deep influence over the region for thousands of years has continued to exist underground. If I even go so far to say this, there are connections with the still existing Rome civilization, the Roman Empire. I don't want to be too speculative here, but there are connections that I can easily make with Caesar, who did not die, who time traveled using the mentioned Tito's cigars to time travel. And there's still these connections here. I've yet to work out completely my theory, but I think that there is there was clearly the budding of a theory which I need to work on more.
So my opponent has been steelmanning my argument this whole time, and I appreciate his good faith attempts to combat my very sound logic. However, I understand, and I'm going to return the favor a little bit. I understand and acknowledge the power of the Saudi royal family, but what my opponent fails to realize is that Azumat Begatov, when filming the Borat movie, greatest movie in all of Kazakhstan, he actually returned profits on that film that far exceed the net worth of the Saudi royal family. And he's been using this money to fund his Borat This Party operations ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is still alive and well today. And during this grace period, now, I won't deny Kazakhstan, Syria, aka the Soviet Union, fell on hard times after the collapse. However, once the film Borat dropped, they have been thriving and living so greatly since. They've even received new technology like toasters and flat screen televisions. So, I mean, Borat himself, President Borat, has made such great advances in technology thanks to the net worth, or the profits made from the film, Borat subsequent movie film. But he has, in fact, used this technology on his toasters. And this is what is keeping their economy alive and well today. Thank you.
And that's time. All right. The judges will be discussing, and we will come back with a ruling.
Cool.
All right. Let's open a new chat. All right, judges. What are our thoughts?
I think Mark won.
Yeah, I think after deliberation, there were a couple topics that maybe Dylan got. There were a couple topics that were pretty close, but yeah, I think Mark took the lead.
Yeah, I think especially with the first three, like I wrote super good arguments that Dylan just completely missed, so it's pretty inexcusable that he missed them.
I thought the first one was a wash, but I thought the second and third, obviously the third Dylan conceded. The fourth, I think, probably went to Dylan, but the fifth seemed to have gotten to Mark with a slight lead.
I think Mark completely obliterated Dylan on the first one.
Really?
The argument, IDM sent about. You should let me tell the argument after we go back. The argument that Dylan was supposed to give. Dylan should have argued that Mark was a schizo because he was anti-Semitic. What the fuck is going Mark to argue? Is he going to argue that anti-Semites are not schizophrenic, that they're not delusional? After that, he can simply argue that Mark was also a continental, so he obviously believed that rocks love him because he exists. So Engels was probably one of his rocks that he used in order to like punch people at night and steal their money. That's like how he got the money, and then he faked letters in order to prove that no, there's this guy Engels that's actually sending me money, which is like.
There was also a missed opportunity on Dylan's end in that first topic. I went ahead and formalized the argument. I'll go ahead and paste it into the chat here, and you can check that out for yourself.
The chat and
there we go.
Discord, yeah.
There we go. So you see
also
there,
in the third debate.
having the trait of being Cerner implies having the trait of being fake. This is something that Mark agreed with. Having the trait of being Ingalls implies having the trait of being Sterner. That's something that Mark also agreed with. And therefore, having the trait of being Ingalls implies being fake. So I think that was just a massive opportunity there that Dylan could have gone with that he just didn't. Just a formally valid argument that proves his position.
Yeah, I remember it seemed like the positions got changed a couple of times from both of them during that first conversation.
Yeah.
Also, on the third topic with Jontron, Dylan just had like such an easy W that he didn't took. When Mark said that was trying to attack Jontron for being white, Mark was actually being racist because Jontron is Iranian. So like Dylan could have just obliterated Mark on that.
Yep.
I can't believe all of them, instead of like trying to like make the topics less insane, they just decided to like go all in, both of them.
Yeah, they would have the less crazy position to defend, and they would just be like, how can I make this crazy? How can I crazy it up?
Real, yeah. And then if they had the crazy position to defend, they would just like take every possible crazy implication and or not even implication, but just crazy position they could surround it. Like they took crazy defenses of crazy positions.
Exactly.
So, are we gonna go give Mark what?
Gonna go give Mark what the what.
Mark what the
Yep.
what? All right, let's go.
Okay.
I'm just a little bit questioning still if this is actually. Oh, they're back. All right, we're done.
Yeah,
Phoenix,
continue,
we were
please.
debating. We were debating if Joe Biden is following Touche.
Oh, real.
Yeah.
The judges have deliberated. We're gonna give the W to Mark W.
That was a close race. It was a close race.
It was.
It was a very strong opening from Dylan.
It
When
was.
Dylan was like,
The first topic I couldn't do. I don't remember my argument. Oh, it was about Santa Claus. Yeah. Okay.
there was a very strong opening from Dylan when Dylan was like, Dylan G into Plaza. I was like, well, that's a massive dub. Massive dub, boss man. That's what I was like when I heard that.
Yeah.
Additionally, Mark, during the first topic, I noticed you said that being Sterner implies being fake and being Ingalls implies being Sternal, and I realized there was a formal argument here that proves Dylan's position. Dylan did not notice it, so I'm not going to count it against you, but there's the formal argument. You can go ahead and check that out right there. It is valid. I have checked it for validity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a close race.
Yeah.
One
in
of
my
the closest
personal
we'll ever
view-
see.
Mm-hmm.
I would disagree with that. In my view, Mark was like the undisputed winner of this. He was just like, and mostly not because he had like extremely solid arguments, but mostly because Dylan just like failed to give such good arguments. There were so many opportunities that Dylan just missed. So on the first debate, for example, on whether angles actually existed, the very simple argument there is that Marx is actually schizophrenic. That's obvious because Marx is anti-Semitic. Mark, would you argue that an anti-Semite is not actually delusional, is not actually schizophrenic? I think that would be an insane position to take. And also, Marx is a communist, so it's very obvious that even though he was poor, he was probably stealing money. As a continental, he probably believed that the rocks love him and talk to him.
Me.
Yeah, so probably Engels was probably one of his rocks, and he was just going at night hitting people with his angles and just
I couldn't
the money
refuse
from
that.
the people. He then wrote a
that's
bunch
a good
of
argument.
letters in order to prove like, no, it's like my rock, Dylan Engels, he loves me. So
Yeah, I can't
Engels just
refute that.
it was one of the rocks that Mark had. Also, on the third debate, there was again a very obvious argument. Mark said that Jontron is white, and that's why we shouldn't listen to Jontron. And Mark is simply racist there because Jontron is Iranian. But apparently Dylan didn't know this because Dylan is also racist. So Dylan, I'm sorry, that was another missed opportunity on your part. And
You guys
also,
were both racist.
Destiny isn't like Tito, but he's obviously the reincarnation of Tito. So I don't know why you didn't simply argue that.
You're both super racist, and you didn't call the other one racist at all. Kind of cringe.
Well, I did call him a chauvinist when he.
That's true.
Yeah, but that's cool and out. That's cool.
And I did call him a priest multiple times, and
Well, you could have just called him a child molester directly.
Yeah,
that's true. I could have done that. I could have been like priest. Sorry, I mean child molester. Yeah, but no, I'm not sure.
that's not a huge logical leap.
No, it's not at all. That would logically follow. Yeah.
So real, yeah.
No, massive dubs for both participants, but the biggest dub goes to Mark W.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Mark W.
Very
Check
close, very
out.
close.
I simply couldn't defeat someone with W in the name, but I put the best foot forward. I've had a shit this whole time. I'm just sitting here pacing back and forth. I'm like, I'm gonna shit my jocks, but this is more important than shitting.
Real. So, are you guys still live right now?
Yes.
Sorry, can I shout out myself again?
Yes.
All right, check me out. I am Dissatisfied Philosophy. DISSASIFIED. Philosophy. Right. Again, I do
You
psychoanalysis.
misspelled that.
You really
No, I
did.
didn't.
There
You
was
misspelled
no
the
T.
fuck out of that.
That had to be a butchering.
It doesn't. Dissatisfied Philosophy. You know how to spell it, all right? I don't.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure they know how to spell it.
I don't do spelling. I do Freud, as I mentioned multiple times. But yeah,
Whoa.
it's a good debate. Yeah.
Whoa, you
I do.
abandoned Lacan? Jesus.
Well, I didn't find a mention of Lacan. I mean, he's already in the thumbnail, so I was
Freud?
like, I'll mention Freud.
I
To
don't
be
know
fair,
how
this
Freud's
was an
gonna feel
L
about
on
your
Mark's part, this
homosexual
debate.
behavior.
Mark didn't mention Lacan once in this debate, so I think that was an L on his part.
Massive L.
Yeah, that was an L. I will
We'll
concede
rectify
that I should have mentioned Lacan. I'll concede on that point.
Well, I could detect hints of psychoanalysis when discussing the Santa Claus Angles theorem.
That's
Certainly.
true.
Oh yeah, defending the existence of Santa Claus is just a W, just an easy W.
Yeah, I mean, like I was having trouble with that because I was like, okay, he exists, but my whole argument was this: I neglected the sleigh variable first. I forgot he had a sleigh, but then I remembered, okay, we would have seen him in the sleigh 4,000 years he's existed. I feel like he only comes out on Christmas Eve. I think I was able to get around that, but the sleigh was definitely a good point. I should have took that into account.
It would have been a foolish thing to do, a foolish notion to reject the existence of Santa Claus, which I'm glad my opponent did not do.
No, certainly I would. That's crazy. That's like using them. That's like using Sci-Hub as like a scientific resource. Like I'm using JReg only.
Yeah, JReg only. I'm personally of the LaRouche school of thought.
I explained the issue with that, and I was not going to mention this, but I think I must now. Is that I think you're throwing in of Soros.
The debate's over. The debate's over.
Okay.
No. This is a circle jerk of intellect here. Okay.
I was going to call him anti-Semitic. Damn it, you missed.
In credit where it's due, although Dylan may not have taken the supreme dub from this debate, Dylan looks way cooler in the thumbnail.
True.
Mark W looks epic. I look like an.
Yeah, I think Mark looks better.
I look Sigma because
Like
I have my
a
Lacan book
thumbnail?
open. You can see the page. You can see the page open.
Oh, okay. So Mark, congratulations on advancing to the final tournament. Well, happy to see you there in the final competition. And Dylan, you've got one more competition in the one more chance to make it in the singles debate. So I'll hope to see you again soon.
Well, I would love if there was I feel like this is my new area of expertise, and I would love it if there was sort of a, consolation tournament for the bright intellectual minds like myself who just did not get to advance because of being outstumped by clearly the greatest academic of our time, the W taking Mark W.
I say, I read Zizek and I read Freud, and that's the truth, and that's all that matters, and nothing else matters.
I also caved in at the bookstore today, and I bought a collection of John Stuart Mill's writings.
No!
I caved in, and I bought On Utilitarianism and On Liberalism.
Let's go.
Recon.
Shut up, Mark. Shut up.
That
Kick this Mark W individual out of the chat. Get him out of here.
That was also at the bookstore, but I said no. Kant is for words that we cannot use on the YouTube.
True.
Face.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. It was a wild ride.
Yeah, no.